Thank you, Tito June. Now for our session tonight, we are blessed to have back again another one of our regular guest speakers. He's currently taking his PhD in civil engineering at Texas A&M University after earning his MS also in civil engineering at the University of Texas at Austin, as well as his degree here in UP Los Baños. He is also a member of Trinity Bible Church of San Pablo and West Oaks Baptist Church in Bryan, Texas. Joining us all the way from Texas for part 2 of our series is Brother Jonathan Lasco.
Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. First of all, I would like to thank the organizing team of the RCM. It's been, para sa mga hindi nakakaalam, it's been a big part of my life. Ever since probably I was in high school, I've already benefited a lot from this ministry. And it's so heartwarming to see young people take the lead like Ian. So thank you so much. And for me, I consider it a privilege to be able to speak with you today. So for tonight, I would be able to continue the series on the balanced life in the new normal. Before I begin, I'd like to mention some few disclaimer. So all images used are not my own. Secondly, all the Bible references are from the ESV version. And of course, thirdly, and importantly, you are all highly encouraged, of course, to evaluate my statements on your own. So outline, simple lang. First of all, we will do a review of what has been discussed last week by Pastor Rodel, and then we will dive straight into the things to consider, additional things to consider to regain balance in the new normal. So what is a balanced Christian life? Well, as mentioned last week, it doesn't mean doing all things in moderation or equally. Rather, a balanced life means faithfulness in one's responsibilities in each area of life according to biblical priorities. So a balanced life is all about priorities, and it is different from person to person. However, during this time, there's a lot of causes of imbalance. So loss of routine, banggitin ko na lang to. I highly encourage everyone to, if you haven't watched last week's talk, to watch that talk, because in that talk, the biblical principles is laid down. And really, itong talk na to is just an addition to that session. So causes of imbalance, loss of routine, distractions, even household members, minsan, that mean well, social media and internet, lack of motivation, even technical difficulties and lack of support. So for example, I guess before you're able to work in an environment, for example, in your work environment wherein you have your colleagues to support you, you even have your boss, minsan hindi naman okay, pero yung pressure that he or she brings to you is important for your productivity as well. And then before we get into the things to consider during the pandemic, we have to remind ourselves of the biblical principles. So firstly, God is sovereign over this pandemic. Itong virus na to na nangyayari did not happen with God just turning a blind eye or with God being caught by surprise. Rather, this pandemic is a part of His plan and for our good if we love Him. Also, balance does not mean equal priorities. We all have different God-given roles, and balance will mean different from each of us. And ultimately, balance is a fruit of the grace of God through the Spirit's work. So really, everything that has been discussed last week is already, like, that's it. You just have to remember those principles and it's all good. But tonight, what I'm gonna do is I would just like to add a new perspective. As myself, I'm a young professional and a student myself. So this talk would be for those who might be living balanced lives before, but are now struggling to cope up with the restrictions brought about by the new normal. And of course, if you do not fall into this category, I also hope that this talk would be of value to you. And I would like to also say that the things that I'm saying now are basically human opinion. It's based on my own experiences, and of course, I heavily like base it on the Bible as well. But really, the things that I'll say is based on my experiences, the authors that I consulted, respected authors and books, and also part of my interview with some of my friends. And of course, there are no hard and fast rules, but the point is you have to figure out what would work for you, of course, in accordance with biblical principles. First, magmuni-muni muna tayo. Let's do some reminiscing of the good times. So, in terms of church life, well, before there's physical gathering, makakasama lahat, we're having fellowship with one another, we help with the ministries. There's a lot of opportunities to go out and spread the gospel. So we have widespread evangelistic efforts wherein we can do from door to door, and a lot of fun activities from the church as well, like church outing, familyhood. That were possible before, but now mahirap. So it kind of like takes a toll in our souls because before we are used to enjoying this fellowship with one another. We're used to going to church physically. Wherein, if you're in the church building, there's a sense wherein you are in this environment that is really conducive for worship to God. That's hard to replicate in a virtual worship setting. With regards to our work and study, well, dati, we have an established routine. If, for example, we are a student at UPLB, well, before, we may, for example, wake up in the morning, and then we have a planned activities going to classes. Maybe we have a favorite place to go to lunch and a favorite place to study. And there's ease of transportation. And again, there's an environment conducive to productivity or learning. And if we're a young professional, for example, maybe we are used to an office where we have a cubicle or a desk, or we have a computer, or even two monitors at that. And there are a lot of free services that we can consult in these environments. But now, all this is mahirap, nawawala during this time. Of course, social life. Dati, we always hang out with friends and family, probably eating at restaurants. I-text mo lang siguro yung kaibigan mo or i-chat mo lang, let's have dinner. And then, yun na, you're always hanging out. And of course, I know for some of us here, maybe like playing games at internet cafes. And all these are good things before, wherein we develop our relationships with one another, possibly joining organizations, participating in clubs, and even pursuing outward activities and joining large gatherings such as weddings, for example. In terms of wellness, sino ba naman dito ang gusto mag-wear ng mask all day? Uh, Especially for those young professionals who are actually going to work physically. So, ang hirap to wear mask every day for 8 hours, for example. Also, before we can take care of our bodies, we can engage in contact sports, madali mag-exercise. Kasi there are a lot of opportunities. Like again, sa UPLB, maraming mga tao dyan nagbabasketball. Even families, for example, it's a nice sight dun sa Freedom Park wherein families or people just having a good time, just enjoying life. Even before pwedeng pumunta sa gym and enjoying a nice massage. And of course, finally, and obviously, before there's no fear of the virus. And not only fear, some of us have even experienced the virus themselves. And of course, most seriously, some of us have even have loved ones who died just this past week. When I see my Facebook feed, there were, I think, at least 5 people who actually posted because of the loss of one of their loved ones. So these are serious things. And so the question is, how do we cope? What are the things to consider to regain the balance during this time? So there are four that I propose. And again, I would like to repeat that these are not hard and fast rules, but I hope that what I'll say will be of some benefit to you. So first one is, let us consider the right attitude towards this pandemic. So first, we should have faith that God is in control. As mentioned before, one of the principles is the God's sovereignty. And this doctrine of God's sovereignty is really very comforting. If you have a problem and you believe that this problem that you're experiencing is because it was brought to you by God and God is in control, then you're immediately one level higher. You're immediately above the point of despair. So you don't go into rock bottom, you don't despair towards the rock bottom because you know that somebody out there is in control. Perhaps during the darkest moments of your life, you may experience despair to some degree, but you don't go into the mire of being in that place of rock bottom. And of course, once you know that God is in control, you also have to be realistic and be honest with yourself. If you're living an unbalanced life, then you have to recognize that problem. That's already a good first step to recognize your weaknesses, your problems, and things that are seemingly off during this time in your life. But that is not enough. Once you recognize your problems, you should not resign yourself to your present situation. Of course, if you see that there are problems in your life, then you have to find solutions to those problems. Again, as mentioned last week, if you're a mouse and your cheese is taken away from you, then in order to survive, you have to look for another cheese. So you have to change with change. And of course, kaya nyo naman yun eh. Kaya naman natin yun because remember how you were also able to overcome past changes in your life. If you're, for example, a student at UPLP and you come from a different place, there was a big change in your routine when you moved to Los Baños. If you're a young professional, there was a big change when you graduated from having, a schedule set for you in your classes, and then you graduated, you become unemployed, you look for a job, and now you have a job. But there's a new routine that you have to follow there. So that's it. And I know some of you may be mathematically inclined, so I kind of like put this slide as well as one of the principle of change. So let FS be your evaluation of your future self and PS be your evaluation of your present self. Well, if you don't do anything, then FS equals PS. Walang nangyari. So in the future, it's just the same. But if you start improving by 1% tomorrow, then the future self increased by 1%. So 1 plus 0.01 times PS. If you start improving by 1% the next day, so day 0, PS, day 2, nag-increase na 1%, so 1.01 times PS. Day 3, nag-increase pa ng 1%. Dun sa day 1, so 1% times 1%, 1.01 times 1.01 times PS. If you do that for a year, so 365 days, you actually improve 37 times. Now, of course, ano naman to, parang all these are just, like unrealistic and simplistic. For one, yung 1% of the improvement might sound so small, pero malaki yon yung 1%. And also, another thing, hindi naman tayo araw-araw nag-i-improve. We must be realistic. There are times wherein we fall. There are seasons of depression, seasons where we actually like go down. But the point is, be like the S&P 500 and not Nokia. If you can see this chart of the S&P 500, hindi naman lahat pataas eh. There are ups and downs, fluctuations. There are even episodes where there are continuous going down. The point is, overall trend is going up. Not unlike Nokia, for example. Dati, mataas siya. But the problem is, it was not able to adapt to change. During the smartphone revolution, Nokia stick to yung kanyang phones, and now it's fiddling in a lower range that it was trading before. So be like the S&P 500 and not Nokia. So that's the first one, attitude. Of course, it's not enough to have this attitude or to believe that you need to change. You actually have to change. And I would argue that one of the mechanisms for change is for us to develop good habits. And there's this book by James Clear. His point basically is that little habits, tiny changes in your life could lead to remarkable results. So habits, these are the things that we do automatically and regularly. And again, whether we like it or not, whatever overcomes a person, according to 2 Peter 2 verse 19, to that he is enslaved. So if there are things that we do every day that might be sinful, then be very careful. Maybe you're unaware that, for example, you're spending a lot of time in something that's not your calling. You're spending a disproportionate amount of time that's in something that is unproductive. That maybe we are living an unbalanced life because of that, and we need to change those habits that we are doing continuously. And the point of James Clear in this book on how to develop habits, there are four. Make it obvious, first of all, and what he means by that is that take time to reflect on what you're doing on a daily basis and see if there are any bad habits that you are doing. Moreover, if you want to do a good habit, so for example, one of the things that you want to do is you want to gain weight. And so one of the things to make it obvious is maybe you need to have a weighing scale, and every day you need to make it a habit to weigh yourself. So make it obvious, but then secondly, make it attractive. And I will not discuss all of this in depth. So basically the point of these three things is that you have to make the habit as much doable for you to be able to bear. So you have to make it doable. You have to make it something that you can do without much effort. And so as an example, take for example, you have this goal to read a book. You're not really a reader, you don't read, but you decide that you want to start reading. Why don't you read the one page a day? Of course, some would say that that's nothing, only one page a day. But at least you're doing something, and in 2 years you would have able to read. You will be able to read a novel that's 700 pages long, like for example, The Count of Monte Cristo. So at least there's something that you're achieving, as opposed to just doing nothing. And here are just some examples as well. Exercising, just do one push-up, studying, maybe read lecture notes, learning a new language, maybe memorize 5 words. And of course, the thing is you won't stop there. Subconsciously, as you are doing this habit, you will be able to develop the drive to increase the bar. But because it's so easy, then there's little effort to be able to start doing that. Now again, of course, this might not work for you. You have to find what works. But the point is, you have to make a change in your habits if you are to gain the balance in your life. Thirdly, it's not enough, of course, to be able to be productive in our respective callings and to be able to change to that direction. A balanced life would also involve rest, because a balanced life also consists of our own well-being. And so there are, according to David Murray in this article, there are three things that overwhelm students need, and maybe not only students, but everyone. So he mentioned sleep, Sabbath, and relaxation. So sleep, it has been researched that chronic sleep deprivation has serious physical, mental, emotional, moral, and spiritual consequences. Now, I would not delve to the facts you just have, there's a lot of articles out there that you can research on your own. Point is, sleep is very important. And not only that, sleep is a gift of God. In Psalm 127, verse 2, uh, David said that it is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil. And here he said, for it is God who gives to his beloved sleep. So sleep is a gift of God. And basically, the context here, para to sa mga hindi nakakaalam, David is being, like always being chased by Saul para patayin siya. But even in the threat of death, he said that kaya kong matulog because si God ang nagbibigay sa akin ng sleep. And not only that, sleep is a daily reminder from God that we are not God. Because God does not sleep, pero tayo natutulog. So sleep, if we sleep, we're also basically saying that in my state of vulnerability, God, please take care of me. And so that's one. And secondly, and really important, Sabbath. So the Bible says that 6 days you shall labor, but on the seventh day you shall not do any work. So now it's Sunday for Christians because we are commemorating the resurrection of Christ, and that happened on the first day of the week. But more than the process of not doing any work, the Sabbath, it is not a matter of human performance. Rather, the Sabbath is a gift from God. According to Mark 2, verse 27, the Sabbath is made for man and not man for Sabbath. So the Sabbath is for our good. It's basically an opportunity for us to set aside all our anxieties, all our worries, all our cares in the daily work, in our daily callings, and just focus on God and focus on our own rest as well. So Sabbath is like God commanding us to eat chocolate to lose weight. And that's true. Sabbath, if you're a student, is like God saying, in order for you to get good grades, don't study. And believe me, it's true. It really works. And it's not just for the pragmatic side of it. It's also in obedience to God as well. And so Sabbath is a way for you to take a break for all the cares of the world and just to recuperate and recover. And of course, even in the daily basis, relaxation is also important. So exercise, maybe practice some breathing techniques, find a hobby, play a video game, watch TV, chat with friends. Relaxation is also important for a balanced life. Sabi sa 1 Timothy 4 verse 8, for while bodily training is of some value, godliness is of value in every way as it holds promise for the present life and also for the life to come. Now, maybe the focus and the intention of this text is to show that godliness is of value in every way. But even then, like, again, the balanced life is all about priorities. And of course, the godliness is at the top of the list. That's one of the big priorities. But we should not neglect the lesser priorities in our lives as well. Problem, however, minsan nasosobrahan sa relaxation. The problem is when your relaxation becomes your calling. And this is also personal to me. And I would like to speak as well to people, especially if you're binge watching, for example, a TV show, or if you're, for example, playing a disproportionate amount of video games. The problem is like when that relaxation becomes a calling. And the developers have figured out a way to get into your psychology. So they have devised all these ranks, all these numbers that if you, for example, win a game or if you perform something, you increase. You will get this achievement. Now, the thing is, what do these achievements even mean in the long run? Like, I mean, who cares if you have a high rank? And the problem is like some of us who are hooked to these kinds of things and sometimes treat these games as our calling. And maybe if that's the case, maybe there's something wrong. And the solution to this is, first of all, let us remember 1 Corinthians 10 verse 31. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. And so in whatever you do, even in your relaxation, even if you're watching a movie, in your exercising, in your or playing games, chatting with friends, all these must be to the glory of God. And there are two questions that may be asked to help. First of all, am I really being relaxed when I do this? So if you're playing a game and then you lose, so some of us may actually not be relaxed if that happens. So the point is, are you really, doing these things for the relaxation of your bodies? Because if not, maybe there's something wrong with the purpose of these things that we are doing. Maybe mali yung purpose ng mga bagay na ito. And of course, more importantly, are we bringing God glory when we are relaxing? So that's of course, the single most important thing. And so that's it. Finally, also a part of a balanced life is to remember that we are not alone in this, and there's a community out there, and we must engage in that community. And a friend told me that social distancing, it's not equal to social isolation. So basically, social distancing, yung iba mayroong nga nasasabi na parang misnomer yung social distancing. Dapat daw tawagin siyang physical distancing because it's all about just the physical distance. And it's not equal to social isolation. Where in social isolation is you're living a life as if you alone exist. And there are also opportunities to develop our social relationships. For one, we can develop our relationship with the people we're stuck with at home. Maybe family, maybe roommates. And even for some of us, maybe highly conscientious students or highly driven young professionals who are so focused in our work. Maybe we can use this time to also develop our relationship with people, to rekindle those relationships. And also, we need to seek the fellowship of fellow believers, maybe just through virtual methods, through chat, through calls, to encourage one another and check up on one another. Because we are not meant to strive in this pandemic alone. And so, that's it. In summary, the pandemic, nakakasuya ng pakinggan yung word na pandemic, has brought about many changes in our lives. To regain balance, we need to develop the right attitude and good habits. But we must also remember to rest and be involved with other people's lives. And finally, of course, assumption naman na itong balanced life na to is a balanced life without God is by definition a contradiction. So if you think you're living a balanced life because you're having a productive work, you're having a good well-being, but you don't take spiritual things into your life, then something is wrong in that. And we must go back to the basics and go to God. And of course, sabi nga last week, ito, kinuha ko lang yung slide din na to. Remember that we will regularly fail. In this side of heaven, of course, all of us are weak sinners, but we are accepted in Christ. Christ has already died for us for our sins. And the gospel says that if we put our faith in Christ, then we will be saved. And in Christ, God already accepts us. And so let us routinely seek God's forgiveness. And of course, let us not give up. For it is God who gives us the strength to persevere. And finally, I have a few messages of hope from the Bible. First of all, Hebrews 4 verse 15. We do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. So Jesus, because he lived a man and he he lived fully as a man. He was able to experience all the temptations and yet without sin. So he knows our weaknesses. And also, 1 Corinthians 10 verse 13, uh, I think the context here is idolatry. And so basically, no temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape. So there is a way of escape that you may be able to endure it. So with that, here are my references. And would like now to entertain questions and comments. And of course, more importantly, again, sabi nga, it's been 500 days that we're experiencing this pandemic. Maybe some of you have already figured out the way on how to regain the balance. It may also be a good time for you to share those experiences. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kuya Jonathan, for your talk. So now we can move forward to our Q&A, but just a few reminders first. First, please keep your questions short and to the point so that we can have more time as many questions as possible. Second, please avoid asking questions regarding very specific cases that might involve sharing private information. Third, for live questions, please use Zoom's raise hand function to be acknowledged by the moderator, which is me, or send them through the Zoom chat privately to our RCM Zoom host, which is also me. And lastly, please join via Zoom via sorry. Please those joining via FB Live may ask questions as well by sending them in the comment section of the FB Live or by sending a private message to the RCM FB page. Your questions will be forwarded to the speaker as time permits. So we have a question for you, Kuya Jonathan. So for our first question, how to deal with difficult imbalances caused by external factors, environmentals, family, etc. Is it wrong to assume or think that you are not the problem, but only outside factors are?
So it's not completely wrong to assume that you are not the problem, but of course you have to be realistic and also investigate because on the one hand, minsan parang sabi ko nga, the good attitude is to accept the situation. Sometimes there are things beyond our control. So I guess my suggestion there is to be able to, find ways to adapt to sa sitwasyon na yon. And again, kung meron nga mga external factors, maybe it's always a good idea to talk with those people who are causing the problems kung meron man. If, for example, your family members are causing problems, they love you, of course. So why don't you just honestly talk with them that you're here at home, you need to work. So I would say that it's both true and not depending on your situation. Sometimes it's true that it's not you that's the cause. But of course, like don't just use that as an excuse, to just retain the status quo.
We have
I don't know if that
another
answers the question or
yes.
something.
Thank you, Kuya Jonathan. So we have another question here. How do we balance having faith in God's control and knowing our responsibility to keep ourselves safe?
Yeah, that's really a big thing. The concept of God's sovereignty and human responsibility is really big. What I would say is that the first part, God's sovereignty, that goes into the attitude part that I was saying. You believe that that there's already the power and there's already a reason why this is happening and it's all from God. But the next part, that doesn't exclude our responsibility that we need to act. We need to act if we are to change. We need to also actually do ourselves. And again, we all know that even yung ating action na to is from God. It is God who give the strength. But the point is just do it. Just do it. Just don't, wag niyong parang porket sabihin na God is sovereign naman, siya naman yung magbibigay sa akin ng strength. you have to do it. You have to actually practically make the change yourself. So yun yung balance doon. On the one hand, believing that God is in control, but on the other hand, also believing that you have to make the work, the effort.
Thank you again for that answer, Kuya Jonathan. So we have a new question here for you. Is it okay to abstain from resting because you know what you have that you have the tendency to abuse rest or overrest, bordering on laziness?
That's really important. So I said earlier that rest is important, but it's case-to-case basis. Sometimes there's also some people who say that there's this thing called counterbalance, wherein like we kind of like there are things that even though they're good in themselves, but in our case, it's not working for us. And I guess my point is there are different kinds of rest. So if these things, are really, sabi ko nga, ask yourself if your relaxation is actually a relaxation. Kasi kung hindi naman, kung over-rest na nga, baka hindi na yun yung rest na kailangan. So maybe there are different other ways of relaxation. Like for example, kung hindi games or hindi nood ng TV, pwede siguro exercise ang isang form of rest or other forms of rest. So yun yung masasabi ko doon. Pero it's really, I think it's a wise thing to abstain in things that we think are, like making us more unproductive. So yun, that would be my answer to that.
Thank you, Kuya
Maybe if
Jonathan.
there are experiences that you'd like to share as well, that would be great. On how you yourself were able to cope up.
Yeah, indeed. Even I personally find it hard as a young man because I also get to have my own social life and also have my own share of imbalances between my studies and my gaming life. So thank you for that advice on laziness and on rest. So we have another question here for you, Kuya. What are some practical tips in finding my balance when it seems like things are out of my control? I want to exercise time management, but it's not up to me. For example, teachers dictate how much of my time needs to be devoted to attending online classes or attending group meetings. Parents dictate how much time I must devote to house chores, or my boss dictates how much time I must give at work, etc. Not just how many hours, but sometimes even the exact time when those most happen.
So yeah, so for that, I actually prepared some slides, like case studies, like tama yung sinabi mo na talagang mahalaga. So I guess for a stay-at-home student, for example, cost of balance, again, too many distractions at home, and even yung iba nga, yung sa isang case naman, yung sa professional working at home, cost of balance, yung yung managers treating you as available to work anytime na parang buong araw is nagwo-work ka. And I guess ang tips doon, again, the right attitude, if you're a young professional, acceptance of the situation, mahalaga, wala nang namang magagawa doon, sa ganung, you cannot change your manager, for example, or you cannot change your teacher. And the right attitude, even though ganon, you have to desire to be productive, and you have to desire to gain balance. And yung habits na naisip ko doon, if you're a young professional, you can probably prepare as if you're actually going to the office by, instead of just waking up 10 minutes before 8 or 10 minutes before 9, you actually wake early in the morning to have breakfast, take a bath, and actually prepare as if going to home. And again, you have to say no. You have to stop working at a fixed time kung hindi naman kailangan. You have to stop working kung hindi naman emergency. And in terms of rest, have a separate time for rest. Don't accept work outside the office hours unless necessary. Don't just always respond to emails from work. And again, like mahalaga, community, chat with family and friends regularly. So as a student naman, you can probably have a regular sleeping schedule. Maybe iba naman yan. Maybe you can set aside the weekend for relaxation. Pwedeng you focus sa araw-araw, you focus dun sa work, but then sa weekend, mag-relax ka. And don't do any academic related work, not only on Sunday, but even during weekends. And of course, call your friends and family. And mahalaga, uh, also find a friend or someone who is on the same boat as you. And it's already a good thing if you know that both of you are struggling and you share each other's experiences. That would already help a lot kung nandun ka sa sitwasyon na yun.
So, ayan. Thank you, Kuya Jonathan. We have an anonymous testimony here. So, ito ang sabi niya. Thank you, Brother Jonathan, for your talk. Regarding what you said about rest, I remember someone telling me that choosing to rest or sleep over work is sometimes a way of putting your faith in the Lord. It helps in keeping the balance so that we do not overwork beyond that we can handle. It is a lovely reminder how God has gifted us with rest so that we may recharge in order to do better in the tasks He has put in front of us.
That's really true. And you know, like some of us are really caught. So yung side ng una, yung masyadong focus sa rest. Yung isa namang side, masyado namang focus sa work. And this is a problem for highly conscientious students, highly driven professionals who work, more than 40 hours a week to get some sort of standing. And the Bible reminds us that rest is important. I think in Psalms, sinabi doon that don't occupy your mind with things so great, and you have to quiet your soul like a weaned child. And so, yes, it's important to be ambitious, but don't put your life as if parang yun lang yung mahalaga sa buhay. So yeah, that's really important to also rest.
So, ayan, very good response po, Kuya. So, here is a new question for you. Is there a difference between the balancing conditions in US and Philippines, as it seems the US health policies are more relaxed?
Yeah, so sa totoo lang dito sa US, yung mga tao hindi na nagmamask. So parang business as usual na dito for the most part. But even then, last year, there were also a lot of changes. People were working from home. And in my case, I'm a PhD student. So before I used to meet with my supervisor physically, but now it's all online. And yung iba, so for students, sometimes yung iba sa atin nagrereklamo na ang busy naman, ang dami naman kailangan gawin. Alam niyo kung ano mas mahirap? Yung walang kailangan gawin. Yung walang nagsasabi na dapat mong gawin yan. Because in that state, you have to find the motivation on your own. And that's really hard. And that's really a big struggle. Yung bigyan ka ng total independence na it is up to you for you to be productive on your own. Napakahirap nun. So that I would say, even now, is one of my struggles. I feel like I'm so free that sometimes it's hard to motivate myself during this time. And I think yung sa iba naman, maybe this is not yung iba naman hindi na parang like sa Pilipinas that we're actually experiencing these struggles. Yung iba it's become political, they always talk about yung policies. So naghahanap sila ng ibang problema to discuss na hindi na naman talaga problem. So yun.
So, a question for directly to you, Kuya. So, how do you motivate yourself in that condition of more independence?
Yeah, so mahirap siya sa totoo lang. And one of the things, big motivation for me is the fact that I need to finish my studies. And so sa akin, what usually happens is, for example, when I'm playing video games, mahilig din naman ako maglaro, or I'm watching TV, there's kind of like, for me, subconsciously, an alarm bell that says, tama na. Parang merong for some reason I've developed that subconsciously that there's an alarm that or my conscience speaks na sumosobra na ako dun sa ginagawa ko. So it kind of like puts me back on track. And sometimes what I do is well now iba na nga yung sitwasyon dito, so I go to a different place to study. I kind of like change the environment a bit. And sometimes altogether, I remove yung games na nilalaro ko. For a season, ina-uninstall ko yung mga games. And by the way, with regards to the games, ang isang suggestion is, yung mga iba kasi may mga rank games, sometimes it's a good idea to play unrank for a change para wala masyadong pressure. So yun.
Someone here is raising his hand.
Elias.
Mute your mic, Mr. Elias.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me, guys?
Yes, we can hear
You're
you.
right. Yep. Yeah, I'm using my phone, so I think it's better to just speak. So I think my question would be is, since we're all working at home, like, how do you consider one day as productive? Kasi you can be busy, pero pag at the end of the day you feel like parang wala akong ginawa kasi hindi naman value adding. So sometimes it's discouraging kasi sa work it's all research pero wala naman talagang output.
Yeah.
So, you yourself, how do you like measure productivity? Parang satisfied ka ba sa isang araw na ay ang dami kong nagawa, something like that?
So it depends from person to person kung ano yung productive. Kasi iba-iba naman tayo ng vocation. So for me, a productive day would involve time spent dun sa research na, well, I'm a researcher, so yun yung ginagawa ko. So I would say that a day is spent productively kapag may output dun sa research. And again, ang hirap din eh. Tama ka, it's really hard. And for me, it's just, meron lang parang conscience or subconscious that kind of like, for me, if I feel happy, then I must have I must have been productive during that day. If I did not feel, happy, maybe hindi naging productive yung araw ko. So sa akin parang yun ganun na yung nangyari na there's kind of like a subconscious metric that kind of like tells me kung yung productive ba ako or hindi. It's kind of like hard to gauge quantitatively kung ano yung productive or hindi. I guess my point is that if you are a well-meaning person na you really want to be productive, there will be something that tells you kung productive ka ba or hindi. And again, it's difficult to find that balance and to find that subconscious. Kasi siguro paano pag yung mga iba feeling nila productive sila tapos hindi naman pala sila productive. So I don't know, to be honest, like it's hard for me to give a concrete answer dun sa tanong na yun. Maybe I would say if you're living at home, maybe ask your family members kung ano yung tingin nila sa ginagawa mo. Maybe that would help as well.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful.
So, ayan po. So we have a new question here. What's the difference between establishing a good routine and being in a rut?
A good routine and being in a run? What's the second part?
So I'll repeat the question. What's the difference between establishing a good routine and being in a rut?
Oh, okay. So, well, marami kasi, yung iba kasi talaga sa atin thrive on routine eh. Parang marami thrive on a routine daily na paulit-ulit yung ginagawa. Yung iba naman hindi ganun. So, pero the point is that yung establishing the routine, I guess ang mahalaga lang doon is yung good habits, establishing the good habits on a daily basis. As opposed to parang go with the flow ka na lang na parang kung ano yung feel mo, yun yung gagawin mo. The point is there must be some sort of developing of a good habits on a daily basis for you to accomplish yung iyong mga tasks. For some, yung routine na yon, napaka-strict na may schedule talaga on a daily basis. Para sa iba naman, medyo hindi masyadong klaro yung routine na yon, which may be fine. We are different people, and sometimes we become productive in different ways and methods.
So, ayun, good your time. So, we have a last question here for you. What advice do you have for people who work based on only motivation, like people who only work when they feel motivated? It's
Yeah.
also like it's also similar to when students like me who simply study when they feel like someone chatted them because it's a stimulus that someone is motivating them to do it.
Sama ako dyan. Sabi ko nga kanina, yung isang struggle ko is I'm so free. So sometimes it's hard because there's nobody who's pressuring me to work. And my my suggestion doon is you have to create your own pressure. You have to create your own deadlines. So ang ginagawa ko, for example, uh, I would tell my advisor, I would say, Dr. Ganan, this is what I'll do, and I'll do this by Friday. So I'm creating my own pressure. Sa akin lang yon, nagwo-work sa akin yon na I'm creating my own deadlines. And if you're motivated by yourself, nagdedepende ka lang sa motivation, ang suggestion ko is, why don't you create pressure? Again, iba-iba naman yan, parang it doesn't work for everybody. But that is just one way to, to kind of like create a different environment for you na hindi ka lang based on motivation. And also another thing, it's also good to see the big picture dun sa ginagawa mo. And importantly, you have to enjoy kung ano ba yung ginagawa mo. Kasi isa din to. If kung yung ginagawa mo, your calling is something that you don't enjoy at all, kung talagang you're based on motivation and wala ka talagang nagagawa, then maybe something is actually even wrong with your calling or vocation or even your course. And maybe it's also time to shift if totally wala talagang enjoyment dun sa ginagawa mo. So yun.
So, ayan, may pahabol na nag-PM sa akin from Jevin. Paano po babalansehin ang oras sa trabaho, pag-aaral, lalo na po ngayon sa workplace po na madaming case ng COVID-19? Can you give me an advice? How can I relax po in that situation?
So, yung mga relaxation na binigay ko kanina, like, it depends on what makes you happy. So for me, I'm happy playing the piano. I get happy, like playing games or watching movies or chatting with friends. So that's what makes you happy. So you have to find the things that make you happy. Ano ba yung nagpapasaya sa'yo? Ano ba yung mga bagay na nakaka-relax sa'yo? Also, exercise has been proven to release the pleasure hormone. So even exercise is a form of relaxation. It may be also a good idea to, just walk in place, maybe do some yoga, and I'm speaking based on what I know. And ano pa ba? And yun, mahalaga nga rin to always set a fixed time to stop working. And ngayon, ang dami ng opportunities sa internet. You can find ways, maybe learn how to cook or learn a new hobby. So just search the internet for some things that, kasi hindi ko alam kung ano yung mga bagay that makes you happy. So you have to kind of like discover that for yourself and make the time for that. So I don't think hindi ko gaano nasagot kasi parang medyo hindi ko na-relate sa COVID time. Pero basically yun yung parang gist of the answer.
Okay.
Again, pahabol, hindi naman porket hindi ka nagpapahinga is parang mali na. We have different situations in our lives. There are some of us that even though we like to rest, talagang mahirap yung sitwasyon. And I guess if at all, kung talagang wala, ang pinakamasasabi ko is just rest on God, you know. Yun na lang. Kung talagang if there's nothing else, just, you know, go to God, cast all your cares to God because He cares for you, and just depend on Him. If at all wala, God is our final rest, so sa Kanya ka tumingin.
So I think that's all the questions that you have answered. Thank you again, Kuya Jonathan, for answering the questions and for your talk.
Thank you
So I
so
think
much, Ian. Salamat. And to everyone as well who asked the questions.
one takeaway na I think that we can see is that we really have to regain our balance and change in these changing times, and as well as continue to pray to God whatever happens. So ayun. May we be reminded that in order to adjust to the new normal, it is important that we consider reflecting on our attitude on the current situation, changing and creating habits to regain balance in our lives, taking time to rest, and staying in touch with our loved ones and friends despite physical distancing.